Hello and welcome to the FYI podcast. That's for your ignorance. I'm Zach Qureshi. Today we're going to talk about the trial of Derek Chauvin, how to deal with racial trauma, and more. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the FYI podcast. Again, I'm Zach Qureshi. Ramadan Mubarak for anybody who celebrates. Today I'm joined with my good friend of the show, George Odueso, business analytics major and poli-sci major at SMU. George, how you doing?
I'm doing great. What's up?
How you been?
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So George was on last summer. We did an episode following the death of George Floyd, so we felt it would be fitting to have him back for the trial. So, as I'm sure you know, Derek Chauvin was just found guilty in that killing of George Floyd. So, can you just give us some immediate reactions, George? What are your thoughts?
I was low-key surprised that he was convicted on all three counts. I'm not gonna lie. Or just like the fact that any accountability happened, like in general. I like another part of me thinks that it's not that surprising though, seeing how like his George Floyd's death just like erupted the country, like the largest protest movement since the civil rights movement, like just insane proportions. So I feel like on that note, it's not that surprising, but just the seeing anyone held accountable is surprising to me. So
Yeah, no, I sort of feel the same way. Like when I heard about it, like I'm sort of a pessimist when it comes to racial justice in this country,
me
so I
too.
was sort of
Yeah,
surprised about it in that way. But then when you think about it, it's like how the protests lasted months,
yeah,
involving millions, and the footage is damning. I don't know how you don't
yeah.
see the
No,
footage and immediately,
just
yeah.
like 9 minutes on someone's neck, like
Mhm.
that's murder.
Right, no, for sure. Um, yeah, so I mean, I sort of saw one response I saw was that like obviously it's good news
Mhm.
that a police officer can't just murder someone and then go free. But I have sort of seen the sentiment that this is just sort of the bare minimum, and we shouldn't be
Yeah,
sort of
no. I mean,
celebrating as
I
like
definitely,
loudly.
yeah, I definitely agree in like recognizing that this is somewhat of a landmark, but also like nowhere near what justice actually is. And like, I don't know, I have the fear that like people will look at this and think something really big has happened and then not take any like systemic action in like fixing like the problems that led to Derek Chauvin being where he is. Like he was there and like he like was able to kill George Floyd because like he throughout his career was never held accountable. Like I don't know, I feel like I saw a statistic that he was like called or like complained on like 27 times in his throughout his career and like
Mhm.
just constantly has incidents. And so I don't know.
Yeah, that's nuts. I don't know that you should be able to be a police officer for 27 complaints.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
might be
I
wrong on the
mhm,
number, but it was like some absurd figure where it was like, okay, how
right,
has nothing happened yet? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I like what you said about people sort of becoming complacent after this, because I feel like we saw a similar thing when Biden was elected, because it's like during the Trump era, it's like it's easy to get outraged and it's easy like to turn that outrage into action, but then it's like once you see Biden's win as sort of a victory, it's easy to then say, okay, things
Easy
are
to
sort of
jump
on the
in.
right track, and then
I feel like
mm,
that's just also like just the feeling I feel like a lot of liberals have is like, all right, Joe Biden is here. Like I don't know if you've seen like the back to brunch thing, like on Twitter, like
mm.
liberals on Twitter will be like we can go back to brunch now that Biden's
Oh, right,
like
yeah,
we
yeah,
don't have to worry about anything where it's like,
it's
okay, like
insane. Mm.
that's cool for you, but like we still have a lot of problems. Like
Yeah, yeah, and undoubtedly you're seeing white liberals that are tweeting
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And it's just part of it is aggravating, but
Mm.
it is what it is.
No, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's on the one hand you're celebrating, I mean, because it would have been much worse if they didn't find him guilty. But
Yeah.
at the same time, during the trial, even, you get the murder of Dante Wright happening. So it just
Yeah.
feels, yeah, it feels like it's surely it's a victory, but how sweet can it be when the
Yeah,
things
exactly.
are still happening? Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. one other thing I wanted to talk about, or one more thing, sort of balance how to stay moderately optimistic during things like this. I mean, I know it's crazy. I mean, it feels like every week you're hearing another shooting or so, or what have you.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
just so easy to become numb to it. That's
right, for
the
sure.
problem I like personally really need to deal with. Like I was talking to my sister and she is like, we're very different. And so she's just genuinely outraged every single time something like this happens, like
Mhm.
just like purely. And I'm just so used to it. I'm just so numb to it that it's really hard for me to feel that same level of outrage, which sucks because it's like that like level of outrage that we need in order to get things done. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely, yeah.
that
It's
is
interesting. I mean, I wouldn't fault you for it because I think there's if you got to strike a balance between staying informed and staying active with
yeah,
being mentally healthy. I think that's also important. But I mean, I get where you're coming from because
yeah,
my
no,
I
because
hear
like
something
seeing
like
all this
this.
stuff on TV, like it's really graphic stuff, and it's
Oh,
really
absolutely,
crazy
yeah.
how normalized it's
Hmm.
become.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear things like this, it's hard for me to get as emotional every time it happens because it starts to become just a sort of this is how things are,
Yeah, no,
which is obviously terrible, but you can see how that could be the case with people. I mean, it's like I'm sure there's a correlation. I'm sure there's studies being done about the correlation of the information age and depression, and as
oh,
it relates
yeah,
to, I mean, I'm sure, I mean that in and of itself, social media and all
that's a
that, but
whole other
that's a whole
problem.
thing. But what I mean specifically is in regards to like the news cycle. So it's like if you think about it, the Civil War was the first photographed war, and that had a tremendous effect on our view of war and how we go into the World War I and stuff like that. And then you get into Vietnam was the first televised war, and you see the huge meteoric response to that. And so now you're getting into every single piece of news. You're seeing it on the big screen. You're seeing it on your TVs. You're seeing it on your
You
computers.
literally
You're seeing
see
it on your
everything
phones.
broadcasted to you in 4K.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's the opposite of the great Gil Scott Heron.
Yeah.
The revolution will not be televised because the revolution will be televised. It's better. It's the quote from what's the Anderson .Paak song? The
Uh,
revolution will not be televised. It'll be streamed live.
6 summers, that's what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, love Anderson .Paak. But yeah, it's yeah. Social media has a lot to do with it. Just the new 24-hour news cycle has a lot to do with it. But just constantly hearing about it, you
Yeah.
know,
It's just like media is all around us all the time. It's hard to avoid.
yeah, absolutely. Especially when it happens. I mean, it's in some ways it's a good thing that you hear about a lot of these things, and it's better than not hearing about it. But at the same time, it's just happening so frequently. It can really,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, conviction is a good thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Okay, here's another thing. A lot of I mean, demands is the wrong word, but a lot of the things that issues brought up by protesters, by the Black Lives Matter movement, was prison abolition
Mhm.
as well as police reform.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's hard when the killing of George Floyd is what leads you to start believing in the abolition of prison as a system, and then it's hard to cheer for sending a person to prison as justice. I'm putting up air quotes for our listeners as justice for that killing. So I mean, it's just a
Huh.
weird. It's interesting to reconcile.
Yeah. I feel like the like whole abolish prison movement is like tough because on the one hand you believe like the whole point of it is the fact that you believe in rehabilitation to the point where you don't think someone deserves to be locked in a cage and that you can like safely get them back into society. But then it just brings up the question like what do we do about murderers, what do we do about people who are like predisposed to be antisocial in a way that hurts their communities? And so yeah, I agree, it's kind of tough to reconcile, but I also think it's not that tough because the abolish prison movement is not like an immediate demand, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
like it's like a very like long-term goal, so
Mhm.
yeah.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think that there's I mean, a balance can be made. I think in some ways, because I mean, personally, I think that prison should be about rehabilitation versus punishment, and I absolutely don't think that the state should be killing people.
Yeah,
But I do see the reasoning of this person is dangerous, and we need to keep them separated. So I think the idea of a prison, not in its current form,
hmm,
much more humane, centered around rehabilitation, but still separated
yeah,
the larger society, I think is a interesting way to go, which is similar to what they've got going on in Scandinavia,
yeah. They
which is
have,
sort of a cliche when it comes to political science. We're always pointing towards
yeah, they
Scandinavia.
just have a radically different approach to like crime and like just people's well-being while in jail as well. Like that's a big
Yeah.
thing. Like people don't talk about
Mhm.
because like there's no way anyone's mental health is okay if you're locked in a cell every day.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Have you been watching Falcon and Winter Soldier, by the way?
I haven't. I think my friend has, but I don't think he likes it that
Yeah,
much.
I don't really like it either. And I ask because it's a little bit related because they try to get into some racial things.
Oh, it did.
I don't think they stick the landing very well. So there's a character named Isaiah Bradley. I'm not going to spoil too much of. I mean, I have issues about the ending, but there's a character named Isaiah Bradley. Backstory is he's a black soldier in like the 50s, and he was experimented on to try to replicate the Captain America serum.
Yeah.
And it like kind of worked, but they sort of discarded him after the war, and they put him in prison. And so he talks to Falcon, and there's like this supposed to be a revelatory speech about how U.S. government hates black people. Essentially, is what he's getting at. What doesn't work within the show, especially when it's considered in a broader Marvel universe sense, a lot of the characters that we know and love from that part of the Marvel universe worked for the government.
Yeah.
And so when
Very
you have a
close.
character who's like, they stuck me in prison in the 50s, and then you think back logically to the events of movies that took place near the 50s, those are all good guys in terms of the Marvel canon. And so it's the show it's trying to reconcile the dubious past of the Marvel universe being connected to military propaganda, but
Hmm.
it's not quite sticking it because a lot of their characters are people that work for the military. And on the other hand, it's like my other complaint is that, it's obviously it's a big corporation, and I'm sure they're only writing this show because it's more profitable to
Yeah.
have a show like this than not. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean
that's
that's like that's the exact same reason why like Wells Fargo says anything about like the LGBT community. It's
right.
like you don't
Yeah.
actually care.
Mm.
They just
Yeah.
a good look. Oh, that also reminds me just of how like corporations have co-opted like the whole message of social justice and like have
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
really like taken it into their like branding of themselves as like really like trying to like I don't want to use the word or not the word, the phrase what is it? Um virtue signal.
Oh, yeah.
Using that phrase, but like it's
Mhm.
literally virtue signaling. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but it's like they don't even. It's like if you're on the right, it can be alienating to you as a customer.
Yeah.
On the If you're on the left, it can also be alienating because they don't go far enough most of the time.
Yeah. And it's like it's just so like clearly like symbolic and just like not like there's no skin in the game in the sense of
Right.
not actually doing anything. Like
Hmm.
you're just saying stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's just
it's
like
like
yeah, the Oscars happened yesterday, and it's like they displaced. I'm not sure the number of homeless people from near the venue, and then did awarded movies about homeless people.
that's terrible.
Yeah, so it's I'm a movie fan. I watch the Oscars every year, so it's and we were talking about Marvel movies. I like Marvel movies enough, so it's like even for me, it's like I have to reconcile.
Yeah.
They're not doing. They're a lot of problematic things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How
And
many
then,
people were displaced?
sorry,
How many people were displaced?
I'm not sure the number, but I read the story that was talking about how there were a lot of homeless people that live around the theater where they where they did the ceremony. Yeah, just stuff like, and it's like I'm sure a lot of the movies nominated are didn't treat, you know, homeless people well or stuff like that. But like Nomadland, which won Best Picture, I think is a gets a lot of criticism because it features people working at an Amazon fulfillment center,
Oh, I
and
didn't.
they had to like get Amazon's permission for that, and so and it's kind of portrayed as like one of the best jobs that you can get if you're really poor is to work at Amazon. And
Mhm.
so it took me out of it a little bit, and it's like the movie itself I think is a really interesting and important portrayal of what it's like to be a homeless person in this country. But it was kind of jarring for me to for it to stop dead in its tracks and be like, I got to work at Amazon to make some money. When you hear all these stories about Amazon workers having to use the restroom while they're still working and having
That
outrageous
just became a
hours.
whole thing. Like
Yeah.
social media exploded, and then Twitter's response to it, or not Twitter, Amazon's response on Twitter was just
Mhm.
like, "Ooh, I don't know if you saw it, but they were
Mm.
like, mm, like they weren't being very like public relationsy. Like they were kind of just being like, we're not
Like they were
doing that.
fighting back.
Well, yeah, no, and it seemed like they were being super defensive, and it just was not a good look.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we should get back to the topic a little bit. um,
Straight a bit.
so I think that obviously a lot of this is an issue of race. How much do you think some of this becomes an issue about gun violence? Some of it becomes a lot of it's about race. Where do you draw the line when you see shootings like this? Is it about when does it become about guns? When does it become about race?
I
How do
think
they
to
interact?
I think to a significant extent it's about guns and like more about like just where like we as a society deem or like who can use like legitimate use of force. That's what I meant to say.
Mhm.
Like we put so much power in the hands of police and in people who are just regular humans, like people that like screw up, people that have bad days, and it's like that's kind of scary, especially seeing the just like ever present trend of like people when they're like at their lowest using that to hurt others. So I feel like for me it brings up a question of like, all right, who should we give guns to? Like who should have them in terms of like policing? Like I just don't think people uh like a cop at a traffic stop should not have a gun and just like immediately be able to kill someone. Like if they have a taser, like I don't know, that's different. But no, yeah, that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. So, do you think that then a solution would be to just like take guns away from cops? Do you think there are some cops that need guns? And do you think that, it would solve anything for them not to have guns?
I think there may be some legitimate situations in which a cop should be armed, but like I don't know, it's something so basic as like a traffic stop. Like, why do you need one?
Yeah, no, I get that.
Like, I just don't think, yeah.
So
Like,
I think
I
my next
don't think
question, sort of
necessary.
connected, would be, um, do you think we need better training? Do you think we need better background checks? For cops, I mean, do you
I mean,
think? I mean, what do you think can happen that would
I'd be
that would
open to
improve it?
I would be open to all the solutions. I actually recently just read that like being a cop, like in the US, is significantly easier of a process than in other like similar countries.
Mhm.
Like it's pretty rigorous in other places, and like here it's like you can kind of just be a cop if you go to
Right.
the academy,
Yeah.
like, make it
I
through.
think I think I read that it was hard. Like, took more schooling to become like a barber than it took to be a
Yeah, I
cop or
bet it
something like
is.
that.
Like you have to put in hours to become a
Mhm.
barber, like a
Yeah.
lot of time.
Hmm.
But
So
yeah, no,
if
I feel
you
the process should
mm,
definitely be more rigorous in terms of who
right.
like let have that power.
I mean, I would say also maybe change the training itself if you direct it towards if you mean you're talking about other countries, how they have it, a lot of that is a lot based around conflict avoidance
Yeah, yeah.
versus
Which is something we're not
self-defense or
geared
whatever.
towards.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I don't know. Like cops will say that they're just like always on edge, like always like fearful. And it's just like, I don't know, like not all situations, like your perception of fear is subjective. And so it's really dangerous whenever you say to a cop, like you can use this amount of force if you just feel like you are afraid.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Even if the
Yeah.
situation like would not warrant it, like you have this power.
Yeah. And I mean, I tend to think that even if you're afraid, your fear does not warrant murder.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at every case of a police shooting of not just black people, of anybody, most of them are going to be, or I mean, maybe not most, but a lot of them are other person had a gun or some kind of weapon or something. Those I can sort of remotely 1% understand. When
Yeah.
you get the stories of people being shot in the back,
Yeah.
for example, Breonna Taylor was in her own home in her
Yeah.
bed. If you
For like
think about
90
people like
bullets
that,
fired into her home.
yeah, how do you make the argument then that the cop was afraid? Is That's my question.
Like
Not for
that.
you, just sort of rhetorically.
Yeah, just the fact that like the police were allowed to do that with no repercussions. Like, I don't know, that sounds like a police state to me. But if
Yeah.
you say that, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
like you're like, that's a bit radical. And it's like,
Right.
I don't know if it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting if you because you interesting is maybe the wrong word, maybe infuriating is a better word. When you
Yeah.
think about the current conservative party claiming to be for a smaller government by definition being what conservative
Right.
means, and
Right.
then advocating the militarization of the police. Have you
Yeah.
seen the
Yeah.
budgets of some of these police forces?
Weird how conservatives are the ones that say don't tread on me, but then it's like when it comes to police, it's like, all right, like we love you, like you're awesome. Keep doing
Please
your
tread on
thing.
us.
Do more of what you're doing. It's
Yeah.
just like, wow.
Yeah.
That reminded me of like a lot of conservative pundits' response to the trial. So many are just so readily able to defend Derek Chauvin. It's like mind-boggling.
Mhm. I haven't seen, partially because the Libertarian Party is sort of small and irrelevant, but
Yeah,
I haven't seen how they've responded. I'd be interested to see, because
yeah,
you'd
no,
think that they would
I,
take, not to like defend any one party, specifically the Libertarian Party, but you would think that by definition, ideologically, if they're taking the idea of small government and running with it,
it's lost.
then they should be anti-police?
I feel
Question mark.
I feel like they are too, for the most part,
Mhm.
but they just have whole other issues with their philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
But no, yeah, like I just will see like Candace Owens or like Ben Shapiro just talk about how like George Floyd was high as a kite, like he was bound to die, like it was bound to happen. And it's
Mhm.
like, did you need to be on his neck for 9 minutes though? And like, do you really feel the need to defend him for
Right.
that? Like, you just saw him kill someone.
Yeah. And
Almost
they say
hundreds
things
of
like,
times.
what other health issues did he have? As if anybody's knee on your neck for
Yeah.
9 minutes, anybody's going to survive that. I
Hey,
mean,
like even if he was super high on fentanyl or
mhm.
whatever, like the fact that his knee was on his neck played a pretty big role in him dying.
Yeah. The cause of death was not whatever he was smoking. The cause of death
Yeah.
was, yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, we're getting at fear as an excuse, if we're getting at, other conditions as an excuse. The most recent one is what we're getting is, I thought I reached for my taser as an
Yeah, no,
excuse.
that one actually blew my mind because even like right wing people were like, okay, like taser and a gun, they kind of weigh like very different amounts.
Yeah.
They're kind of very different objects.
Mhm.
So the fact that you would confuse the two, especially after being a cop for 26 years, I just do not buy that.
No, definitely.
And I also don't think anything will happen to her, which is just like par for the course.
Yeah, sadly. So, I guess one more question would be, I mean, how optimistic are you about a Biden presidency? Or, I mean, should I say, how optimistic are you about a Harris vice presidency? Does that help anything?
Just in terms of racial justice, like, or
Yeah.
just in a broader sense.
I mean, I guess first of all, in terms of racial justice, and
Okay.
then after that, in general.
Um, See, I don't know about um, Biden or Harris's proposals for criminal justice. I mean, I just have the like feeling that it's not gonna amount to much, especially considering Kamala Harris's record as the Attorney General in California.
Mhm.
She got like lambasted about that in the primaries,
Yeah.
and for good reason. Like she talked about smoking weed on the breakfast show, and then like she has a record of just locking up like petty drug offenders.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that's interesting. um
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Biden helped write the crime bill, so I really don't know how
Yeah.
proactive he'll be in criminal justice.
Right. Right. Yeah. Not just the executive. If you look at like Pelosi they were like taking that kneel. Remember that photo shoot?
Yeah, that's my thing about the Democratic Party. They're very performative, and then they
Mhm.
never do anything.
Yeah.
So
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, there was one thing going back to Kamala Harris. I mentioned her specifically in the question because people had some hope. Oh, she's a black woman that's going to help out in some ways with her, with her views. Recently, she just voted to deny she wanted to sort of force India to respect patent law in order to restrict uh, distribution of COVID vaccines. And so
hmm,
I saw people tweeting like the juxtaposition of headline, first Indian American vice president,
yeah,
headline, Kamala Harris votes to
yeah,
respect patent law
you
over
can
human lives in
literally
India.
you can find that anywhere you look. Like,
Mm.
I don't know, Cornel West said something about this when Obama got elected, and he said that he was kind of just essentially a figurehead and essentially just like a blackface in a high place that would like satisfy people to a superficial extent, but he still governed like any centrist like would essentially.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I feel that.
I'm very skeptical of when people are like, look, it's a black person in a position of power, you know.
Mhm.
But I mean, Biden did one good thing that I heard of recently. He wants to pull out of Afghanistan, which like is kind
Right.
of a big thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is good. I mean, Trump sort of started to do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah,
he also just kind of moved troops around, so it was like,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
leaving, but they're going somewhere
If
else.
if this if this means going forward, we're going to completely withdraw from the war on terror, I'm all for it.
I'm
But
all
if
for
it
it.
if it just
Yeah,
means, like you said, moving troops around, because they're still, drone strikes are still happening all across
yeah,
the Middle East, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's. I mean, cautiously optimistic, I suppose, is how I would
yeah.
describe it.
No, I will give him all the credit he deserves if he goes through with it.
Hmm.
But I cannot lie, I'm skeptical.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that, and I mean, I think it was like day one or week one, executive orders revoking the Keystone XL pipeline, rejoining Paris Climate Agreement, stuff like that, which makes me optimistic.
Yeah,
But at the same time, the way he did it, where it's like I'm signing 100 executive order, 100 is not the right number, but
yeah,
signing a bunch of them at the same time, and like it works both for his more moderate and more progressive following, because the for the progressive following, it's like, oh, cool, we're back in the Paris Climate Agreement, but it's very easy to sort of bury what all he did with by saying here's 100 again, 100 something number, um, executive orders, and so the more moderates can be like essentially doesn't mean anything because it's just the first week and he's just signing a bunch of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, so it did it like a dual wield purpose of it's sort of appeasing the more progressives without actually doing that much. And then from then on, you can get into the, the real meat of his presidency
Yeah.
since then. But,
Details.
I mean, I voted for Biden.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm not the kind of leftist to dislike the Democratic Party enough to not vote for them. I tend to become a pragmatist when it comes to
He's
voting.
not a Bernie or Buster.
Definitely not. And I'm not an accelerationist. You seen these guys?
Yeah, no.
Not for that. Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because that becomes. I mean, for our listeners, I'll describe accelerationism. But the idea is basically you're such a left-wing person that you're going to vote for the rightest-winged person ever in order to quote unquote wake up the American people to how bad being on the right is.
Yeah,
in order
right.
to
Like,
accelerate a
that seems
revolution.
like instead of an acceleration left, we would just plunge further into like fascism.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then the common critique of accelerationism is, well, in the meantime, people of color are hurting.
Yeah, no, like these like decisions have consequences.
Mhm. Yeah.
I feel like most accelerationists come at it from a very privileged position.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I voted for Biden. And I mean, just to go back to sort of the main topic, racial violence in this country is not limited to just Black people and just police. I mean, we recently saw the shootings in Atlanta against those Asian American women. And I mean, if you go back even further, there are many cases of acts of hate against Muslim Americans stemming from the 9/11 attacks. So, just in general, if you're a person of color and you feel sort of neglected or even hated by this country, I'm just going to real quick plug the UTD Multicultural Center and the Student Counseling Center. For more information, you can go to multicultural.utdallas.edu or email mcsuccess@utdallas.edu. They have lots of people on staff and they've got workshops and seminars, stuff like that. On top of that, you can schedule an appointment through the Student Counseling Center if you go to counseling.utdallas.edu. It's all totally free. If you need any help, we talked briefly about balancing mental health with staying informed. If you need any kind of help with that beyond anything we've said, again, go to counseling.utdallas.edu and they're there for you. And so are we. You know what? You can email me personally at zakie.qureshi@gmail with whatever you want. So we here at FYI are here for you. And again, UTD Multicultural Center and Student Counseling Center are here for you. So that's just a quick plug while we're talking about that. So anyway, back to it. So yeah, I mean, the Atlanta shooting, obviously more of a question maybe of guns than the police shootings would have been, if you think about it, because it was just a citizen.
After that shooting, I kind of hoped that like people would see it's not really just a race thing, it's more just a police carrying out their job thing.
Right.
And it's like this, like even though it happens like disproportionately to Black people, like it is a problem with like policing as an institution.
Right. Yeah. When I said it doesn't only happen to Black people, you're right. It does disproportionately happen to Black people. I did not mean to minimize or equate in any way, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, like every time I see something about policing, I'm just like, how is it still like this?
Yeah. No.
How have we not changed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, my favorite movie, Do the Right Thing. Mm-hmm. That's 1989, and that remains incredibly prescient. For those who don't know, it's also about police killing a Black man.
Happening even decades before that movie too.
Right. No, I'm not even thinking that's the first. Just if you watch them, there's a short film Spike did. It's called Radio Raheem, Eric Garner, George Floyd, Three Brothers, I think is what it's called. And it cuts footage from real life footage of police brutality with footage from his movie. And the similarities are crazy. It's yeah. And it's not because, Spike Lee is some kind of gifted psychic prognosticator.
Oh yeah.
It's because things haven't changed and it was just an accurate portrayal of what was actually going on. Mm-hmm. So all that to just point out how long this has gone on and how crazy it seems that it can still be happening. Yeah.
No, the just the fact that it still continues, that's just like the biggest thing.
Mhm.
It's more soul crushing is like this really hasn't changed.
Right. Yeah. You would think, I mean, with protests at such a massive scale, with it having been in the
Yeah.
limelight for as long as it has, you think there would be something.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the BLM protest movement over the summer was just so it was really big, but it was substantively so different from the civil rights movement in the 60s because you had so many like discrete, like concrete, like organizations that were like directing like people in terms of movements. They had like
Right.
concrete aims in terms of like a new civil rights act. Like they had like they always had like charismatic figures who like captivated people's attention. Like it was so substantively different, but it's crazy to me to think that this like protest movement was bigger.
Yeah. And you would think that social media would help to have more like to have a single figurehead sort of character.
Mhm.
Characters maybe the wrong word. But and you like you said, you don't really. I mean, when you go back to the civil rights movement, you got several different organizations, and
Yeah,
there's a legal part to it. You know, they were
yeah,
fighting in the
yeah.
courts. I mean, we just had, not to say, wasn't helpful or wasn't righteous, but we just basically just had people in the street versus the civil rights movement was organizing all kinds of boycott sit-ins as well
Mhm.
as the legal side of it. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, we don't really have a figurehead
I feel
except for
like
the
it's
people that have been
social.
killed, which is sort of perverse if I mean, because there's sort of the narrative of, oh, they didn't die in vain, they died for a purpose kind of thing. Well, no, they were just murdered. It
Yeah,
wasn't,
this
mhm,
wasn't a choice or a
yeah,
sacrifice. Like they just had their life taken.
right, yeah. So, I mean, there's rather than like, an MLK, Malcolm X sort of figure, we end up having iconography of dead people, which is very effective in a sort of rhetorical sense, but it's also they can't literally talk. Like we
Yeah,
don't have a galvanizing sort of leader in a true sense.
yeah. I had a thought that part of the reason for like why the protest was so big was partly social media, but like my thought about that was I feel like there was a lot of co-optation of using the protest as a sort of social thing and social signifier
Yeah,
without any actual commitment or dedication to what was happening. So
yeah,
you would see people like go out and take pictures of themselves protesting. Like that's good. Like you're going out, like you're making your voice heard. That's awesome. But it's like you do that and then like just go home.
right. Yeah,
Like
yeah. You post the black square, you
yeah.
retweet the change.org or whatever.
And it was like I saw so many Instagram influencers just like I saw videos of people just like getting out of their Uber, taking a picture like at the protest and like just dipping, just straight up.
Oh, that's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, so it's
yeah, for sure.
like the social media aspect is nice in the fact that it projected and amplified it, but like
Mm.
it's just so easy to use it.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. I do remember seeing people, that I know on Twitter, Instagram, taking selfies. It's almost like you can hear them thinking, "Oh, what should I wear? What would I
Yeah,
look best
no,
in at
that's
this
really what
protest?"
happened. Like
Hmm.
it's almost like some people saw it as a social event, which just like blew my mind.
Hmm.
Actually blew my mind.
Yeah, my favorite. I almost said my favorite. What I thought was the biggest instance of sort of irony in all that sort of performative activism would be the posting of the black squares,
I
the
hated that
idea of a
so much.
media blackout,
I hated it
because
so much.
what had actually happened was it was actually silencing actual community leaders and organizers
Yeah,
because
no,
people are
people
posting
were
black
upset
squares with
on
no
Twitter that
text.
like people weren't seeing what they needed to see.
Yeah, they're blowing up the hashtags where there would be important information
Yeah,
with
No, that
last
just like
words.
that epitomized the whole like co-optation of it as a
Mhm.
social thing to me. Like that was
Yeah.
like, wow.
So here's another sort of similar interesting thing I saw on my Twitter feed. So the new movie Judas and the Black Messiah just won a couple of Oscars. At
Oh, I
least
didn't
Daniel
know.
Kaluuya won for Best Supporting Actor. I'm not
Oh,
sure. He
that's
might have won
awesome.
something else. But yeah, I like the movie quite a bit. I think it's important that we finally got a biopic, Fred Hampton. That's all well and good. I saw one take that on Twitter that was like, this is still a big budget movie. Is it right to dramatize these events to make money off of them, to make millions, to make money for HBO Max and to make money for AT&T on a broader scale? Is that just so? What would you say about that? Because I know you like the movie.
Yeah, no, I feel like there are multiple sides to something like that. Like on the one hand, yeah, like if it's a big budget, big movie, like all like these corporations are gonna make massive amounts of money. But I feel like you also have to think about if you're making that movie with those resources, like what is your purpose? Like what are you trying to accomplish by like getting it done? And I feel like you can still like have, I don't know, I guess positive outcomes, even if you're doing it through like that method, I guess. But I
Yeah,
like I don't think something like that is all bad.
for sure. I mean, I tend to agree because I think that the filmmakers themselves had good intentions.
Yeah.
I think most of the people watching it are going to learn about something they didn't know about, which is
Yeah.
good. But I do sort of see the through line idea of, well, is it a necessarily good thing that we're using this tragedy that was the assassination of Fred Hampton in order to make money for the AT&T corporation?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's tough.
As long as I got you here, George, I think we could talk about some other news things. I got a couple other news stories just briefly.
Okay.
So we talked about already Biden withdrawing from Afghanistan.
Mhm.
So we didn't cover that too much. So Prince Philip died.
Yeah, no, that was crazy.
A lot
And
of people,
feel like
it's
it's
interesting.
crazy.
Mm,
I feel like it's crazy because that meme of him on Twitter, like when he was
yeah,
like to die, was so recent.
right.
And
Hmm.
then he like died.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of people have been defending him, and a lot of people have been chastising him for a lot of things. So my thought
Yeah,
process
no, he
is,
kind of is like a colonizer, like
right.
literally.
Yeah, yeah. Because my thing is, I saw people on Twitter being like, "Oh, his connections to colonialism." No, 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 no. He was literally a
He's
colonist.
literally the head
So
of it.
my example that makes most sense for me personally, audience, you know that I'm from Pakistani.
Yeah.
Mans was alive during the British occupation of India and Pakistan.
Same thing for Kenya, dude. He was
Yeah.
literally alive for all of it.
Hmm. So, and so people say, yeah,
Not at
he
all.
fought in World War II. He was a good guy. I don't know about all that.
I'm not at all upset that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I thought it's a little bit insensitive, but I thought was kind of funny. So the BBC had continuing broadcasting programming about the death. Over 100,000 British citizens called in and complained that they were covering his death for too long.
No way.
100,000.
Yeah, no, they just have that whole like cult mentality around British royalty, which blows my mind.
Yeah, 100,000 people said, "Shut up about Prince Philip. Watch something else. Show something else." Yeah. So yeah, I think coming from a Kenyan and Pakistani, I think
Yeah,
we can
no.
both safely say that we're not too
Yeah,
upset about this death.
both are connected to a history that is like directly tied to that occupation.
Yeah, yeah. Other thing, Matt Gates. You've heard about Matt Gates?
That,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
no, that's
I'll recount. I'll summarize it real quick, and we can discuss anything you want to discuss. So, Republican Representative Matt Gates of Florida has been accused of having a relationship with a 17-year-old, as evidenced by public payments made to her for travel expenses. An associate of Gates, Joel Greenberg, has previously been indicted for sex trafficking. Allegedly, Greenberg has acted as a middleman in connecting other Florida politicians as well with young women. Other members of Congress had called for Gates' resignation as well as federal investigations. So this is nuts. This is crazy.
Fact, what killed me about this story, as awful as it is, was the fact that he literally used Venmo as
Yeah.
his way of trafficking like underage girls. Wild. Like,
Mhm.
like what?
I feel like you got to be, not to advocate in any way his actions, but you got to be slicker than that if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, like if you're gonna do something like that, like you really have to be smarter.
Yeah. So I think that it's, on a more serious note, a little bit sad that with the news cycle we have, this was, I haven't heard too much about this beyond like poli sci Twitter, like politics Twitter.
Mhm.
Like I haven't seen too many actual news stories about this. I feel like most people don't have an awareness of this. An actual representative, an actual Congress member trafficking young women.
Yeah, and doing it so like openly, like just
Mhm.
I don't know. Like there was that other story about when he was in the Florida House, how he showed like nude photos of other women to other legislators on the House floor.
Mhm.
They had like a game about it. Like that's mind-boggling.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's nuts. I
It's
don't know.
it
Yeah,
makes me like it makes me think that this world is really just high school to some extent. Like
yeah. No, it's quite disheartening when you think about this. Is these are some of the most powerful people in the
yeah.
country, and by extension, they're for the world if you think about it. But
And he's like actually like a frat kid.
yeah. Mhm. I think that I think that's about it. I think we've covered what we need to cover. I'm just going to plug one more time the UTD Multicultural Center and Student Counseling Center. You can go to multicultural.utdallas.edu or email mcsuccess@utdallas.edu, or you can schedule an appointment through the Student Counseling Center. You go to counseling.utdallas.edu. George, thanks for coming on the program. Great
Thank
friend of
you
the
for
show.
having me, man. I'd love to come back.
For sure, we can make you a regular. You know, you should contact the SMU newspaper, and we can make it a
Yeah.
whole joint thing.
No, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Yeah. How does co-host George Udoso sound to you?
Sounds perfect to me.
Yeah. So again, that's all time we got. Thanks for listening, George. Thanks for being here again. I've been Zach Qureshi. Ramadan Mubarak, and as always, peace in the Mideast.
Peace
Hold
be
on.
with
Before we move on, actually, George, do you have anything you want to plug?
Do I have
You have anything
anything
going
to
on?
plug? You know what? I actually do not.
All right. That's cool. That's
Nothing I want
cool.
to plug.
You don't want to plug your social media or anything?
Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George_Odueso. That's about it.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks for being here again. And
Yeah.
we'll say it one more time if you want to say it together.
Okay.
All right, 3, 2, peace in the Mideast.
In the Mideast.